Red wine dripped down my 7-month bump, staining the white silk like a crime scene, while my husband toasted his $8.4 billion merger. He grinned at the crowd, thinking I was just a pregnant prop to be discarded once the cameras stopped flashing. He told me I could not afford a lawyer to fight him. He forgot one detail. I am the one signing his paychecks. And tonight, I will burn his empire to the ground without raising my voice. My name is Rowan Kinsley, though for the last 4 hours, I have simply been Declan's wife. At 32 years old and 7 months pregnant, I have become invisible in the most expensive room in the city. The Summit Signature Gala at the Halcyon Crest was designed to intimidate. Crystal chandeliers hung low like frozen explosions, and the air smelled of aged scotch and desperate ambition. My husband, Declan Waverley, stood in the center of a circle of gray suits, glowing with the arrogance of a man who believes he has conquered the world. They were toasting the acquisition of Astor Meridian, $8.4 billion. That was the number on everyone's lips. Declan looked the part of the Titan. He held his glass high, laughing at jokes that were not funny, basking in the adoration of men who would stab him in the back for a percentage point. I smoothed the fabric of my dress over my stomach. It was a pale, shapeless chiffon sack, selected specifically by my mother-in-law, Vivian. I remembered her cold fingers adjusting the collar earlier that evening. "You look healthy, dear," Vivian had said, her eyes scanning me with critical disdain. "But let's choose something modest. We don't want to distract from the men's moment. Do we? Pregnancy is a miracle, but it can look so messy." I had let her pick it. I let her dress me like a dowdy ghost because it suited my purpose to be underestimated. In this room, invisibility was a superpower. Declan beckoned me over with a flick of his wrist. I waddled slightly, playing up the heaviness of my 3rd trimester. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, his grip tight and possessive, but lacking any real warmth. He smelled of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of adrenaline. "Gentlemen, this is Rowan," he announced, presenting me like a new car he had already lost interest in driving. "Does your wife understand the magnitude of what you pulled off today?" Waverly, one of the investors, asked, eyeing me like I was a piece of misplaced furniture. Declan chuckled, the sound wet and patronizing. "Oh, Rowan, she thinks a merger is just like when she mixes the whites and colors in the laundry." The men roared with laughter. I felt the vibration of Declan's chest against my arm. "I try to explain the financials," Declan continued, squeezing my shoulder hard enough to bruise. "But you know how it is. She's better at nesting. Numbers just make her dizzy." I kept my face perfectly still. I offered a shy, confused smile. I did not correct him. I did not tell them that I analyzed market trends before breakfast, or that I understood leverage better than anyone in this circle. Silence was my armor. Let them think I was soft. Let them think I was nothing more than a pretty, vacant incubator for the Waverly heir. My clutch vibrated against my palm. A single notification illuminated the screen, hidden from their view. It was from the private investigator I had hired 6 months ago. If they played dirty tonight, just nod. "File is ready." I looked up at Declan. He was beaming, drunk on his own reflection in the investor's eyes. He thought I was here to witness his ascension. He thought I was the devoted wife standing in the shadow of his brilliance. He had no idea. I was not here to support him. I was here to ensure he walked into the cage I had built, locked the door, and swallowed the key. Vivian arrived like a storm front, but it was the woman beside her who sucked the oxygen out of the room. Blair Camden. She was wearing scarlet. It was a tight, violent red that looked less like a dress and more like a fresh wound against the ballroom's gold palette. My mother-in-law did not even glance at me. She guided Blair straight to Declan, holding her elbow as if she were delivering a prize heifer to the county fair champion. They formed a tight triangle mother-son, and the mistress leaving me drifting on the periphery like unwanted flotsam. Blair placed a manicured hand on Declan's forearm. It was a familiar, possessive touch. Declan leaned into it. He did not pull away. He did not look for his wife. Vivian scanned the group of photographers setting up near the marble pillar. She frowned, her eyes darting to my stomach, then to my pale face. "Rowan." "Dear," Vivian said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked the venom underneath. "Why don't you sit over there in the back? You look so swollen. We wouldn't want to ruin the framing of the victory shot, would we?" I looked at Declan, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say that his wife belonged by his side on the biggest night of his career. Declan barely spared me a glance. He was too busy admiring the way the light caught Blair's diamond earrings. "Mom's right. Go sit down. Rowan, you're casting a shadow." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and nodded obediently. I stepped back, fading into the background just as they wanted. From my vantage point in the shadows, I watched them. The name Aster Meridian kept floating up from their circle, spoken with hungry reverence. Declan said the name like it was a kingdom he had conquered. He had no idea he was speaking the name of the shell company I had built brick by brick to bury him. A silver-haired investor, perhaps feeling a pang of pity for the discarded pregnant woman, turned slightly toward me. "And what is your background?" "Mrs. Waverly. Did you work in finance before?" This I opened my mouth to answer, to tell him about my dual degrees and my years as a senior analyst, but Vivian slashed the air with her champagne flute. "Oh." Rowan Vivian laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. "She stays home. She arranges flowers. When you're carrying a Waverly heir, your job is to just be quiet and grow." Declan grinned, clinking his glass against the investors. "Exactly. Leave the Shark Tank to us. You should see the terms I got Aster to agree to. Total control of the board. No oversight on the liquidation of the distressed assets. I practically robbed them blind." I stared at the back of his neck. He thought those terms were a victory. He did not realize they were the bars of his cell. I had written those terms myself. I had designed the trap to look exactly like the kind of power grab a narcissist would find irresistible. I needed them to keep talking. I needed them to feel completely safe, completely superior. I let my shoulders slump forward. I placed a hand on my chest and took a shallow, ragged breath, making sure my voice trembled just enough to be pathetic. I think I just need a little water," I whispered, backing away. "Please, excuse me." They did not even watch me go. They turned their backs, sealing their circle against me. I leaned against a velvet-covered wall, hidden by a large fern. My expression shifted instantly from frail to focused. I reached for the diamond bracelet on my left wrist. To them, it was just another expensive bauble Declan had bought to buy my silence. I pressed the small clasp on the underside 3 times in rapid succession. A tiny haptic vibration buzzed against my pulse. It was not jewelry. It was a high-capacity encrypted drive, now active and syncing with the receiver I had planted earlier. It was recording every boast, every insult, and every admission of guilt. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a vessel for their legacy. They were about to find out that I was the architect of their ruin. I slipped out of the ballroom using the oldest excuse in the book. I told a hovering waiter that the heat was getting to me and I needed to elevate my feet. He nodded sympathetically, ushering me toward the private elevator that led to the VIP suite on the top floor. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the gala, I dropped the act instantly. My posture straightened. The hand rubbing my lower back fell away. I was not a fragile pregnant woman anymore. I was an auditor entering a crime scene. The suite was silent and smelled of lemon verbena. I did not go to the plush sofa to rest. I went straight to the mahogany desk where a man in a nondescript gray uniform was waiting. He did not ask who I was. He simply slid a thick manila envelope across the polished surface and left without a word. I sat down and tore open the seal. Inside was the final term sheet for the merger, along with the draft signature page Declan had arrogantly pre-signed earlier that morning to speed up the ceremony. I pulled a gold pen from my clutch and began to read. I did not read like a wife looking for her husband's name. I read like the senior risk analyst I used to be before Declan convinced me to quit. My eyes scanned the fine print of the liabilities schedule. There it was. Buried under complex legal jargon and nested shell companies was a toxic debt load of $300 million. Declan had stripped the assets from his own failing division and dumped the debt onto the post-merger entity. He was cleaning his own books by poisoning the company he was buying. And the revenue projections for the next quarter were inflated by nearly 40%. It was a masterpiece of creative accounting. My phone buzzed. It was Tessa Vale, the litigation shark I had retained 6 months ago. "We have eyes on the document," I texted her, my thumbs moving fast. "He cooked the books. $300 million in debt hidden in the subledger. Revenue is fake." Tessa's reply came through 3 seconds later. "That is enough to bury him, Rowan. But if we stop him now, it is just attempted fraud. We need him to commit." I looked at Declan's signature on the draft page. The ink was bold, looping, and confident. He had signed his death warrant, but he needed to do it publicly to make it stick. "Let him sign," I typed back. "I need proof of intent. I want no wiggle room for him to claim negligence." "Understood," Tessa replied. "Once he puts pen to paper on stage, he crosses the line from civil liability to criminal securities fraud. The freeze order is ready to execute on your command." I set the phone down and touched the cold paper. Declan thought he was merging with a faceless conglomerate called Astor Meridian. He thought he was outsmarting a board of directors he had never met. He had no idea who was sitting on the other side of the table. He believed I was living off the allowance he deposited into our joint checking account. He believed my family money had dried up years ago. He never knew about Kinsley Trust 79A. My grandmother had been a paranoid, brilliant woman. She had set up the trust in Delaware a decade ago, locking my inheritance behind layers of anonymity that even Declan's forensic accountants could not penetrate. The trust was designed to be a parachute, but I had turned it into a weapon through a series of holding companies. Kinsley Trust 79A owned 100% of the voting stock of Astor Meridian. I was not just his wife. I was the majority shareholder of the company he was trying to defraud. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror near the door. The woman staring back at me was still wearing the shapeless, pale dress that made her look harmless, but the eyes were different. They were hard. They were calculating. "You really thought I was stupid, didn't you? Declan," I whispered to the empty room. "You thought you could buy my company with my own money and leave me with nothing." I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, checking my reflection one last time. I was no longer a wife preparing to stand by her husband. I was a CEO preparing to terminate a contract for cause. I picked up the envelope, tucked it into my oversized clutch, and headed back to the elevator. It was time to go downstairs and watch my husband sign his life away. I paused in the corridor shadows just outside the ballroom. The heavy velvet curtains muffled the music from inside, but they did nothing to dampen the voices drifting around the corner. I recognized the sharp, imperious tone of my mother-in-law instantly. "It is actually perfect timing, if you think about it," Vivian was saying. I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. "When he leaves her next week, she will have the baby to distract her. The press loves a sad, abandoned mother. That belly is such a useful prop for her to cry over. It makes the victim narrative so much easier to sell." Blair laughed. It was a cruel, tinkling sound. "God, she is huge, though. I mean, did you see that dress? She looks like a whale wrapped in a sheet." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. I stepped out from behind the curtain. My heels made no sound on the thick carpet. I appeared right beside them like a phantom. Vivian gasped and took a half step back. Blair jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Rowan!" Vivian snapped, recovering her composure quickly. "Creeping around, I thought you were sick." I ignored Vivian completely. I turned my gaze to Blair. I looked her up and down, my expression perfectly neutral, showing zero anger and zero hurt. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, watching her squirm under the weight of my stare. "Blair," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What she snapped. Defensive. "You have lipstick on your teeth," I said softly, pointing vaguely at my own mouth. "Right. There. It looks quite messy." Blair's eyes went wide with vanity-fueled panic. She immediately began scrubbing at her teeth with her finger, her composure shattering instantly. I did not wait for her to fix it. I did not wait for Vivian to reprimand me. I simply walked past them back toward the ballroom entrance. I did not need to scream at them. I did not need to throw a drink or make a scene. Winners do not make noise. Winners collect evidence. As I walked, I pressed the clasp of my bracelet again, this time. I held it down for 4 seconds. A long vibration confirmed the command. The data from my drive was now bridging wirelessly to the receiver my technical team had planted in the hotel's audio-visual system 3 hours ago. The emails, the forged signatures, and the recordings were queuing up on the main projector server. Waiting for my signal, I re-entered the ballroom just as the lights dimmed slightly. Spotlight beams swept across the room and focused on the raised stage. Declan was up there, standing behind a lucite podium, looking like a king. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome the man of the hour, Declan Waverly, and the CEO of Astor Meridian, Calder Reed." Calder walked out from the opposite wing. He was tall, severe, and impeccably dressed. He was also on my payroll. I had handpicked him to play the role of the puppet CEO for the shell company. To Declan, Calder was just a suit he had bullied into submission. To me, he was a loyal lieutenant. Calder scanned the crowd. His eyes found me standing near the back, half hidden by a pillar. He gave a microscopic nod. It was a salute to the true boss. Declan leaned into the microphone, his smile blinding. "Thank you all. Tonight marks a new era. We didn't just make a deal today, we conquered the future." He laughed at his own grandeur, expecting applause. He got it. Calder stepped up to the mic next. He kept his face solemn. "Declan is right. Tonight is indeed about the person who truly owns this future." Declan clapped Calder on the back, missing the double meaning entirely. "That is right. Calder. My night. The owner's night," Calder corrected smoothly, his voice flat. I felt a vibration in my clutch. I glanced down at my phone. A text from the audio technician I had bribed appeared on the screen. "Audio feed from the family table is live. We are recording." Green light. I looked over at the table where Vivian and Blair were now sitting. They were whispering, heads close together. They thought they were safe in the noise of the applause. They did not know that a high-fidelity microphone hidden in the centerpiece was catching every venomous word. I locked my phone and smoothed my dress. The stage was set. The players were in position. It was time to start the real show. Blair approached me with a glass of red wine in her hand and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She moved with the predatory grace of a jungle cat until she was right in front of me. Then, with the theatrical timing of a soap opera actress, she stumbled on the perfectly flat carpet. The glass did not just fall. It was launched. A wave of dark Pinot Noir crashed against the white chiffon stretched over my 7-month bump. The liquid soaked through the fabric instantly, spreading like a fresh gunshot wound across my stomach. The glass shattered on the marble floor with a sound that cut through the chatter like a scream. The ballroom went dead silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at the pregnant woman standing in a puddle of red and glass. For a second, it looked gruesome, like I was bleeding out. Oh my God! Blair shrieked, her hand flying to her mouth in a performance of shock that was almost impressive. I am so sorry, I just tripped. I stood frozen. The wine was cold and sticky against my skin. I did not flinch. I did not cry out. Vivian stepped forward, not to help me, but to inspect the damage to her carefully curated evening. She looked at my stained dress with unmasked disgust. Honestly, Rowan, Vivian hissed, loud enough for the nearby donors to hear. You are such a disaster. Look at you. You have completely ruined the aesthetic of the night. I looked toward Declan. This was the moment a husband rushes to his wife. This was the moment he checks if she is hurt or if the baby is safe. Declan did not move. He stood on the edge of the stage, his face tight with annoyance. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the photographers, gauging the PR damage. Get her out of here! Declan snapped at a passing event coordinator, waving his hand at me like I was a spill in a grocery aisle. Take her upstairs. She looks grotesque. I can't have her in the photos looking like that. I let the coordinator lead me away. As I walked past the stunned crowd, I kept my head high. I did not shed a tear. They thought I was in shock. They were wrong. I was in the zone. In the hallway, a venue medic rushed over with a first aid kit. I stopped him with a raised hand. My voice was calm, devoid of the hysteria everyone expected. I do not need treatment, I said clearly, but I need you to log this interaction. The time is 9:42 p.m. Note that the mother is calm. The fetal movement is normal and strong. There is no physical distress. Only emotional duress caused by a third party. The medic blinked, confused by my clinical tone. Ma'am, I should check your blood pressure. Log the time, I repeated, my eyes locking onto his. 9:42 p.m. Victim is stable. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, he stammered, checking his watch. I turned and walked into the private changing room reserved for the VIPs. I locked the door behind me. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the most satisfying sound I had heard all night. I stripped off the ruined white dress and let it fall to the floor in a heap of stained silk. I kicked it into the corner. That was the last time I would ever wear something Vivian Waverly chose for me. I walked over to my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the secure app my team had built. A single button pulsed in the center of the screen. Execute. My finger hovered over the glass. I thought about the last 3 years. I thought about the way Declan dismissed my career. I remembered the night he told me I was too emotional to handle the family finances. You don't understand the balance sheet, Rowan, he had said, laughing as he poured himself a drink. Leave the numbers to the men. I understand, I whispered to the empty room. I understand that your assets are about to become liabilities. I pressed the button. The screen flashed green package delivered, the emails, the hidden debt schedules, the recordings of his fraud, and the proof of his affair were now flooding the inboxes of every board member, every major investor, and the SEC compliance office. It was done. I turned to the garment bag hanging on the rack. I unzipped it and pulled out the dress I had brought for myself. It was black. It was architectural. It had sharp shoulders and a plunging neckline that showcased my pregnancy not as a weakness, but as a source of power. I stepped into it. The fabric was structured and expensive. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I clipped a small wireless microphone onto the lapel, connecting it directly to the ballroom's master sound system. I looked in the mirror. The sad, mousy wife was gone. The woman staring back was a shark in dark water. Someone knocked tentatively on the door. It was a nurse the hotel had sent up. Mrs. Waverly. Are you okay in there? Do you need some water? I opened the door. The nurse took a step back, her eyes widening as she took in the transformation. Mrs. Waverly is gone, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I am going to work. The master of ceremonies' voice boomed over the speakers, slick with false enthusiasm. And now, for a few words of tribute to our visionary, please welcome back Mrs. Rowan Waverly. We have a little prepared speech for her to read. He gestured to the teleprompter. The text scrolling across the screen was pathetic. It was a script about devotion, sacrifice, and standing behind a great man. It was designed to humble me. It was designed to remind everyone that I was just an accessory who had been sent to change her clothes like a naughty child. I stepped into the spotlight. The hush that fell over the room was different this time. It was not the awkward silence of pity. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of confusion. My black dress absorbed the light, making me look like a void in the center of their celebration. I gripped the podium. I did not look at the teleprompter. I looked straight at the camera lens broadcasting the feed to the giant screens behind me. They say that behind every great fortune, there is a crime, I said, my voice magnified and crystal clear, and behind every great man, there is supposed to be a silent wife. But tonight, I found myself standing in a puddle of red wine, and it clarified things for me. Declan stepped forward, his smile twitching at the corners. He reached for my arm, his grip hard enough to warn me, though his tone was light. "Honey," he laughed nervously into his own lapel mic, "you are tired. The pregnancy hormones are making you a little dramatic. Let's get you a chair." I did not pull away. I simply turned my head and looked at him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I did not blink. I did not speak. I just let his hand fall away from my arm as if he had touched a hot stove. The audience saw it. They saw the fear flash in his eyes before he could mask it. I turned back to the microphone. Let us talk about the merger. Specifically, the acquisition of Astor Meridian. I was reading the term sheet upstairs. Section 14, paragraph B. A ripple of murmurs went through the front row. Wives did not cite contract clauses. It states that the final execution of the sale requires the physical signature of the beneficial owner. I continued, my tone bored, as if I were reading a grocery list. Not the CEO, not the proxy, the beneficial owner. I turned to Calder Reed. He was standing stage left, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mr. Reed," I asked, my voice ringing out like a gavel strike, "is the true owner of Astor Meridian present tonight?" Calder stepped forward. He looked at Declan, then he looked at the crowd. Finally, he looked at me. "Yes," Calder said, his voice grave. "The owner is standing on this stage." The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Declan let out a loud, breathless laugh. He threw his arms out wide, trying to reclaim the narrative. "Well, obviously, that is me. I am the one buying it. I am the driving force here. It is a metaphor. Everyone I own the moment." He looked around, desperate for validation. Sweat was starting to bead on his forehead. "Right," Calder Declan stammered. "I mean, technically the paperwork is still processing, but for all intents and purposes, I am the man." Calder did not answer. He just kept his eyes on me. I walked away from the podium. My heels clicked rhythmically on the stage floor. Click, click, click. I walked past Declan. I walked past the frozen MC. I stopped at the antique table where the ceremonial leather folder lay waiting. This was the folder meant for the photo op. It contained the final contract. I placed my hand flat on the leather cover. It was a heavy, deliberate gesture. I drummed my fingers once. It was the way a person touches something they paid for. I looked down at the front row. Vivian was sitting there, her champagne glass halfway to her mouth. Her eyes locked onto my hand resting on the folder. I saw the realization hit her like a physical slap. The arrogance drained out of her face, replaced by the first hairline fracture of true terror. She knew. In that split second, she finally knew. "You can't afford a lawyer," Declan had said. He was right. I did not need a lawyer. I owned the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I flipped open the leather folder. It was not the ceremonial prop they expected. Inside lay a single, crisp document on heavy bond paper, bearing the raised seal of the state of Delaware. I slid it toward Declan. He looked down, his eyes scanning the header. Certificate of Beneficial Ownership. Kinsley Trust 79A. His face went white. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep, and yanked me violently behind the heavy velvet curtains of the stage wing. We were out of sight of the audience, but the microphone on my lapel was still live, though he did not know it yet. "This is fake," Declan hissed, shaking the paper in my face. "You printed this on your laptop. You think you can stop a merger with a prop." Vivian stormed behind the curtain after us, her face contorted with rage. She did not care about the document. She only cared that the show had been interrupted. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked. "Get back out there and smile. You are ruining everything. You are nothing but a pregnant belly and a tax deduction. Rowan, do not forget who gave you a roof over your head." I smoothed the sleeve of my blazer where Declan had grabbed me. I looked at Vivian with pity. "You vetted me when we got engaged," I said calmly. "You looked for scandals. You looked for debt, but you stopped when you saw orphan. You never checked the name Kinsley. You only checked the dress I wore." Declan's phone began to vibrate against his thigh. It was a relentless, angry buzzing. He pulled it out. The screen flashed Custodian Bank. Urgent. "Answer it," I ordered. He hesitated. "Answer it and put it on speaker," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Or I walk back out there and tell the SEC chairman in the front row that you are trading while insolvent." Declan jabbed the speaker button with a trembling finger. "Mr. Waverly," a frantic voice crackled from the phone. "We have a problem. The wire transfer for the acquisition capital has been halted. We received a counterparty veto 5 minutes ago." "What?" Declan screamed into the receiver. "Override it, I am the CEO." "We can't, sir." A second voice cut in. It was the compliance officer. "The instruction came directly from the controlling trustee of the target entity. If you attempt to close this deal without their consent, we are legally obligated to report it as attempted wire fraud. That is a federal crime. Mr. Waverly, we are freezing the escrow." Declan lowered the phone slowly. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and realized he had forgotten his parachute. Suddenly, Blair pushed her way through the curtain. She had no idea what was happening on the phone. She only saw Declan looking defeated. "Oh, stop it, Rowan!" Blair spat, crossing her arms. "This is pathetic. You are just jealous because he chose me. You are trying to sabotage his big night because you can't stand that you lost." I turned to look at her. "Camden Strategies. That is the name of your consulting firm, isn't it? The one billing Declan's company for advisory services?" "So what?" Blair sneered. "I am a legitimate consultant." "I know," I said. "I audited your books this morning. You see? I acquired the holding company that owns Camden Strategies 3 weeks ago. I own your firm, Blair? Technically? I am your boss." Blair's mouth fell open. "And I noticed you charged your first-class flight to Paris and this hotel suite to the company corporate card." I continued, ticking the items off on my fingers. "Since you were not on official business, that is unauthorized personal use of company funds. In legal terms, we call that embezzlement. And since the amount exceeds $10,000, it is a felony." Blair stepped back, her face draining of color. She looked from me to Declan, realizing for the first time that the man she was stealing with had no power to protect her. But Vivian was not listening. She was looking past me, out toward the main stage. Her eyes were gleaming with a malicious, desperate light. She raised a hand to signal the technician in the booth. She thought she had one card left to play. She thought the video she had prepared a montage of unflattering, tearful moments she had secretly filmed of me during my pregnancy would humiliate me into submission. She believed it was her checkmate. She did not realize she was about to start a movie that would end her social life forever. "Go ahead, Vivian," I whispered. "Press play." The house lights died, plunging the ballroom into sudden darkness. Vivian stood by the curtain, a triumphant sneer plastered on her face, waiting for the humiliating montage of my hormonal breakdowns to begin. The massive LED wall behind the stage flickered to life, casting a harsh blue glow over the crowd, but it was not a video of me crying. It was a screen recording of an iPhone interface projected 20 feet high. The contact name at the top read, "My Muse." The blue bubbles on the right belonged to Declan. The gray bubbles on the left belonged to Blair. The timestamp was from 2 hours ago. The text was sharp enough for everyone in the back row to read. Declan: "Is she gone yet? I can't stand looking at the breathing cow anymore. It kills the vibe." Blair: "Working on it. Did you hide the secondary account if the audit catches the transfer?" Declan: "She is too stupid to check the subledgers. Just get her out of the frame so I can close." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The cruelty of the phrase "breathing cow" hung in the silence like a physical stench. Blair covered her mouth with her hand, shrinking back as hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Then, the audio kicked in. A voice note icon on the screen expanded, and Vivian's voice boomed through the concert-grade speakers. It was crystal clear, stripping away any possibility of denial. Vivian's voice: "Make sure you spill the wine on the stomach. Blair, right on the bump. The photographers need a tragedy to sell the sympathy angle. Do not miss. We need her looking pathetic, not pregnant." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The titillation of a society scandal evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard revulsion of decent people witnessing abuse. The investors who had been laughing with Declan 10 minutes ago were now stepping back, creating a physical gap between themselves and the Waverly family. They were not just disgusted, they were terrified of the liability. Then, a low, synchronized hum vibrated through the floorboards. 500 phones buzzed at the exact same second. I had pressed send on the broadcast list. "Check your inboxes," I said, my voice cutting through the dark without raising a decibel. Heads bent down. Faces were illuminated by the pale light of smartphone screens. The subject line was simple: Waverly Insolvency Data Room Full Disclosure. Inside that link was everything. The $300 million in toxic debt, the inflated revenue reports, the chain of shell companies used to siphon funds into Vivian's personal accounts. Declan scrambled onto the stage, waving his arms frantically at the projection booth. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking. This is a deep fake. It's AI. She fabricated it. Don't look at it." Calder Reed stepped up to the microphone. He did not yell. He simply read from a tablet in his hand. "The metadata on the messages is verified against the carrier logs," Calder announced, his voice flat and clinical. "The IP addresses match the devices currently active in this room. The financial documents are pulled directly from the bank's API. This is not a simulation. This is raw data." Declan froze. The excuse died in his throat. From the side entrance, a woman in a sharp navy suit walked onto the stage. It was Tessa Vale. She moved with the efficiency of a blade. She did not look at the crowd. She walked straight to Declan and slapped a thick stack of documents against his chest. "You have been served," Tessa said, her voice projecting to the first few rows. "Divorce petition citing adultery and fraud, and a temporary restraining order freezing all marital and corporate assets pending a forensic audit." Declan clutched the papers instinctively, looking at them as if he were holding a live grenade. Vivian rushed forward, grabbing the arm of a senator she had been charming earlier. "Senator, please?" she wailed, her mask of sophistication completely gone. "It is a trap. She planned this. She is unstable." The senator peeled Vivian's fingers off his jacket as if she were contagious. He did not say a word. He simply turned his back. Then the person next to him turned. Then the next. It was a wave of rejection. The room did not boo. They did not shout. They simply turned their backs on the Waverly family, leaving them alone in the spotlight of their own crimes. I stood in the shadows of the wing, watching the empire crumble. It did not take an army. It just took the truth. Declan scrambled off the stage and bolted for the service exit. He was running toward the VIP suite on the top floor. He knew the digital systems were locking him out, freezing the wire transfers and the escrow accounts. But he was banking on a desperate, archaic loophole. If he could get a physical signature on the hard copy of the merger agreement before the official timestamp of the court order, he could tie this up in litigation for years. He could claim the deal was done before the freeze. I did not run. Running implies panic. Running implies that the outcome is uncertain. I walked to the elevators with the steady, relentless rhythm of a rising tide. Calder Reed walked on my left, and Tessa Vale walked on my right. We stepped into the car, and I pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors slid shut, sealing us in a quiet capsule of absolute control. "He thinks the ink will save him," Tessa said, checking her watch. "He has about 3 minutes before the federal agents clear the lobby." "Let him have 2, I replied, watching the floor numbers climb. "I want him to feel the pen in his hand before I take it away." When the elevator dinged, we walked down the corridor toward the suite. I could hear Declan shouting through the heavy oak doors. I pushed the door open. The scene inside was chaotic. Declan was leaning over the mahogany desk, his tuxedo jacket discarded on the floor, sweat dripping down his nose. He was shoving a pen toward the terrified banker and the company lawyer he had dragged upstairs. "Sign the witness line," Declan screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I am ordering you to attest to this signature. Do it now!" The banker, a man named Mr. Henderson, was trembling, holding his hands up in a defensive surrender. "Mr. Waverly, the system is red flagged. I can't." "I don't care about the system," Declan roared, jamming the pen point against the paper so hard it nearly tore. "I am signing it. Watch me." He raised his hand, poising the nib over the signature line. "Do not let the ink touch the page," I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped the room cold. Declan froze. His hand hovered an inch above the document. He turned his head slowly, his eyes wide and bloodshot. I walked further into the room, flanked by Calder and Tessa. I looked at Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said smoothly, "if you witness that signature, you are facilitating corporate fraud. I am the sole beneficiary of Kinsley Trust 79A. I hold 100% of the voting rights for Astor Meridian. I have not authorized this transaction." "Mr." Henderson looked at Calder, then at the certificate of ownership Tessa held up. The color drained from his face. He snatched the document away from under Declan's hand. I cannot witness this." "Mr. Henderson stammered, backing away toward the wall. "The deal is void. The counterparty has vetoed." "It is my company!" Declan shrieked, slamming his fist onto the empty desk. "I built it. I am the husband. It is marital property." "Actually," Tessa interjected, her tone razor-sharp, "trust assets established prior to marriage and kept separate from commingled funds are not marital property in the state of Delaware. You own nothing, Declan, not the company, not the house, not even the chair you are standing next to." Declan looked at me, his face turning the color of wet ash. The pen slipped from his sweaty fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. It rolled until it hit the toe of my shoe. Suddenly, the door to the suite banged open. Blair Camden stumbled in. Her hair was wild, her red dress was disheveled, and she was clutching her clutch like a lifeline. She saw Declan standing defeated, and her survival instinct kicked in with brutal speed. "I am not going down for this," Blair panted. She rushed to the table and dumped the contents of her bag. "I am not going to jail for him." She grabbed a silver USB drive and a portable voice recorder and slid them across the polished wood toward me. "Blair," Declan whispered, looking at her with betrayal. "Baby." "What are you doing?" "Don't you baby me," Blair yelled, her voice shrill. "You told me it was legal. You told me she was just a dumb housewife we could pay off." She pointed a shaking finger at the USB drive. "It is all on there," Blair said, looking desperately at Tessa. "The recordings of him planning the fraud. He explicitly said he needed to humiliate Rowan to distract the board so he could close the deal without her consent. He called it the distraction protocol." "That proves intent." "Right. If I give you this, I get a deal. I get immunity." Declan looked as if he had been shot. His knees buckled, and he slumped against the desk. He had lost his company, his wife, and now his accomplice in the span of 10 minutes. The door opened one last time. Vivian Waverly appeared in the frame. She was gasping for breath, her face pale beneath her heavy makeup. She looked at the USB drive on the table. She looked at Blair's accusing finger, and then she looked at me. She realized that the voice recorder didn't just have Declan on it. It had her instructions. It had her voice ordering the wine spill. It had her voice conspiring to embezzle funds. For the first time in the 7 years I had known her, Vivian Waverly had absolutely nothing to say. She brought a hand to her throat, her eyes filled with the terrifying realization that her socialite life was over and her life as a defendant was about to begin. The door to the suite did not bang open this time. It opened with the quiet, terrifying precision of authority. 2 men and a woman in dark suits stepped into the room. They did not need to shout. The badges on their belts spoke loud enough. "Financial Crimes Division." The lead agent walked straight to the desk. He did not look at the crying mistress or the trembling mother-in-law. He looked at my husband. "Declan Waverly," the agent said, his voice flat and professional. "We have a temporary restraining order regarding the assets of Astor Meridian and a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and travel documents. Hand over your phone and your passport. Now." Declan looked at the agent. Then he looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a terrified man who realized the walls were not just closing in. They were crushing him. "Rowan," Declan whispered, his voice cracking. "Rowan, please, tell them. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Think of the family." Vivian stood by the window, clutching the curtains as if they were the robes of a queen she used to be. She looked at me with pure hatred, but beneath the hate was the realization that she had been dethroned. Blair stood up, pointing frantically at the USB drive lying on the desk before the lead agent even asked. I placed my hand gently on my stomach. My son kicked against my palm. It was a strong, healthy rhythm. He was safe. There was no danger here, only the necessary cleaning of a house before he arrived. I was not destroying a family. I was protecting one. The agent turned to me. "Ms. Kinsley, for the record, can you confirm your position regarding the attempted acquisition?" The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "I am the sole beneficial owner of the Kinsley Trust and the majority shareholder of Astor Meridian," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And I did not authorize this transaction." That sentence was the key turning in the lock. Calder Reed stepped forward immediately. "As acting CEO, I am officially declaring the merger agreement void due to lack of owner consent. We are initiating an independent forensic audit of all pre-merger financials effective immediately." Tessa Vale stepped up next, handing a second folder to the agent. "This file contains the evidence of unauthorized transfers and the manipulation of revenue projections. We are also filing for an immediate freeze on Mr. Waverly's personal accounts to prevent capital flight." Declan slumped against the desk. "You can't do this. I have an employment contract. I have a retention clause if the deal falls through." I still get my severance. I walked over to him. I stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the sweat on his upper lip. Oh, the retention clause, I said, allowing a small, cold smile to touch my lips. You really should have let me read that for you. Declan, you thought it guaranteed you a payout. It doesn't. That clause states that in the event of a financial irregularity, the executive officer is legally bound to remain within the jurisdiction and available for questioning until the audit is complete. You are not getting paid. Declan, you are getting grounded. Declan's eyes widened as the trap snapped shut. He was not just fired, he was legally chained to the wreckage he had created. And you, Vivian, I said, not bothering to look at her. Your name is on the co-signing documents for the shell accounts Blair opened. The auditors will be very interested in your explanation. Vivian made a sound like a strangled sob, sinking onto the sofa. The agents moved in to collect the phones and laptops. Blair stood up, handing over the USB drive to the lead agent before he even asked. I am cooperating, Blair blurted out. I am a witness. Put that in the report. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the door, my black dress moving fluidly around me. Rowan! Declan called out, his voice desperate and pathetic. How can you do this? You have no money. You can't survive a legal battle against me. I stopped in the doorway. I did not turn around. I spoke to the reflection of him in the mirror on the wall. You told me I couldn't afford a lawyer to challenge you, I said softly. You forgot one thing. I own the table. I walked out of the suite and down the hall to the elevator. The doors slid open, and I stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected a woman who was tired but unbroken. I was alone, but I was not lonely. The toxicity was gone. The lies were gone. As the elevator began its smooth descent to the lobby, I took a deep breath. I was not leaving a marriage. I was closing a bad contract. And for the first time in 3 years, the ledger was finally balanced. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Rowan's revenge. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and press that hype button so we can get this story out to more people.